try to stay upwind of you all, so you can hear what I have to say.
You'll hear better than me.
Yeah. You can hear better this way. Okay, and I think they're all joining us for the beach walk as well.
They are. Roger. Steve and Roger.
Okay, well they'll get. Okay, well why don't we get started? Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you guys. I know that this was a rescheduled event, so it's great that you're able to come again on this beautiful sunny day. I want to start out just first with a personal kind of introduction to who am I. So I'm a coastal geologist with Natural Systems Design based out of Bellingham. We also have offices in Seattle and in Port Angeles. And I have a license in geology in Washington State. I'm also have a master's degree from Western in coastal geology, where I studied bluff recession on Guemes Island, looking at coastal processes, sea level rise, sediment transport, and kind of adaptation strategies based around that. So, I've done a lot of work in this area, and I've worked at Natural Systems for about 5 years now. There, I do a menagerie of different things. The biggest thing is working on restoration, shoreline restoration projects. So currently, I'm actually working on about, I think it's a dozen different projects, all shoreline restoration related, mostly bulkhead removal, to try to restore processes, mostly for fish habitat.
In Skagit County or?
All over the Puget Sound. But some in Skagit County. I've done work in Skagit County before. Haven't actually done a project on Guemes in particular. I've done a lot of site assessments and kind of looking at vulnerability on the other side of the island, but no restoration project in Guemes. Besides the restoration work, I work on a lot of sea level rise vulnerability assessments. So I'm working with Washington Sea Grant doing a sound-wide vulnerability assessment where we're looking at the vulnerability of every single parcel in Puget Sound for flooding, erosion, groundwater problems, and then looking at what's on the parcel. So if there's buildings on it, if there's critical infrastructure, if there's roads. So really just trying to come up with, what are the most vulnerable parcels and where should we direct our attention. And that work kind of stems into the adaptation strategies that we recommend. I worked on the town of Coopville, I should say, coming up with their adaptation plan for sea level rise, because I don't know if you guys have been there, but they have some very old buildings on the bluff that are getting flooded, and they have a ton of issues.
Kind of too late for them, maybe.
Yeah, it was a very difficult project, but trying to come up with some things to do, and looking, all the way out to like 2100, kind of, what's the town gonna do there. And then kind of the final piece is I work on in the Shore Friendly program. So have you guys heard of Shore Friendly? Yeah, and so I think Ellen will go a little bit more into that, but there's a Shore Friendly program in every single county in Puget Sound, and what they do is provide free site assessments for coastal landowners like yourselves, and just to kind of give best practices on how to protect your property, but doing that in an ecosystem-friendly way, right? So a shore-friendly way. And through that program also comes the beach walks, and we've also identified a lot of restoration opportunities through that program. So that's sort of the spiel about me. I'll pass it off to Ellen to talk about the NW Straits Foundation, and then I would invite all of you guys to introduce yourselves as well, if you don't mind. Maybe say why you came to the beach walk, what part of the island you live on, if it's low bank, high bank.
Yeah, I'm Ellen Gowdy. I work for the NW Straits Foundation, and I'm the Nearshore Program Coordinator. So I work a lot in nearshore restoration at a lot of our sites, as well as in the Shore Friendly program. We also do a bit more of marine-focused things. The mission of the NW Straits Foundation is to protect and restore the marine resources. And through that, one of our big programs that we have is the derelict fishing gear removal program, our nearshore restoration program, and shore friendly programs. And so we kind of tie in the marine, nearshore, and coastal riparian zone ecosystems to create habitat. We focus a lot on forage fish because they're a species that salmon eat, and so tile goes in as well as the seabirds, and the impacts that living on the shoreline have to those habitats. So with the shore-friendly program, like Avery said, we provide free technical site assessments through consultants we bring out, and they kind of do a top to bottom of your parcel. They give you information on drainage, vegetation, things with some otherwise if there's house setback or relocation that needs to happen. We can provide resources for that, and it comes in a report with great recommendations of how to better protect your property from these changing coastal processes, evolving coastal processes, as well as how to best protect the coastal habitats that we're here to protect. So yeah, if any of you are interested afterwards, please let me know and we can get you set up with that. It's a great resource. If there are potential for armor removal or vegetation and drainage changes, amendments to your property, we also have some cost share opportunities that we can help provide, and that comes after this process. So, yeah. And this is Owen. Yeah, we'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Owen. I'm an intern at NW Straits Foundation. I'm Owen. I work at NW Straits Foundation. I'm an intern. I work with Ellen.
Go around and introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm Richard Myers, and I live down way about 20 houses at Slow Bank. I've been out here since 14. Prior to that, visiting, but we bought our place in 14. And I'm interested. I have followed Northwest Foundation. I've attended various presentations over in Cap Sandy and that area, the website. Appreciate what you guys do. I definitely want to get involved with the pond rubbish removal. That sounds kind of fun and also good stuff. So that's me.
I'm Phil Fenner. I live up the hill here, so I'm neither low nor high bank. I'm 50 feet above and behind and 100 yards behind. So it's all kind of, doesn't impinge on me personally. It's sort of a general interest of mine, and I'm also videoing for the Historical Society.
I'm Roger Brooks. We got a place down the way, the bank, and we've owned it since 2016, and just trying to be good stewards, make sure that we're not wrong thing, and education is wonderful. Look forward.
I'm Kellyanne. I live in Olympia. I'm just here visiting.
Sweet.
And yeah, enjoy learning new things.
My name is Maverick.
I just found 5. Yeah.
5. Whoa! In 5 minutes. The pro.
I'm Labrie, and I'm Roger's wife.
Oh, live down there. All right.
My name is Steve Hawes. We are 4 houses down. And we bought here in 2000 and rebuilt our home just completed in December, this last December. And we are pretty much full-time here, spring, summer, and fall. I'd like to see how otherwise. We're just interested in this conversation. There is to learn.
I'm Sue O'Donnell, and my grandparents discovered this 100 years ago. And so my sisters, my 2 sisters, my brother, and our cousin, all live on Guemes now. And we've been coming to Guemes for, well, I'm 75, so. And I mean, it's just amazing that our grandparents discovered this. They were from Illinois. And here, the 5th generation.
We're just doing a little beach walk here. It's a beach walk here for looking at coastal processes and sure, it's going to be about a couple hours. We're just doing introductions right now. Great. No, it's great. Don't worry about it.
Okay, we're in now.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's actually $20.
Yeah, come on.
We're just going around doing introductions right now. We're over here.
Our grandfather had a shoe store in Anacortes, and in the
days for
So, the lots on Guemes Island were being sold, a 50-foot lot on North Beach, where it was $50. And he thought that was a really good deal. So he bought one.
It's a good idea. And where do you live?
I'm Lewis Lane.
Lewis Lane?
Yeah. So, I retired.
Carol Stephanie. I live on Holiday Boulevard, which is in the East End. And I'm just curious about
My name is Bill Van Black, and this is my wife Stephanie, and she'll tell you everything you need to know.
I'm Stephanie Cavanaugh. We have a house on South Shore Road, a half mile east of the ferry. So we're High Bank Waterford, and we've had it since 2002.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm David McKee. I'm from northeast Seattle, but I've been coming down at Cordes since I was a kid. I grew up there. We're beach walkers. We walk around all the way around the islands on the beach. So since 2022, we've done Whidbey, 22 days, 156 miles.
Whoa.
Camino, 50 miles in 10 days. Bainbridge, Vashon, Marrowstone, almost finished Anderson Island. And now we're on Guemes.
Wow. You must know a tide chart like the back of your hand,
That's
huh?
the first thing you check. Check the tides, then we decide if we can do it. There you go.
Where did you start today?
We started at the ferry.
At the ferry. You gotten this far.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't know. We just go until we run out of gas.
And you know, somebody probably already warned you that the beach does not extend all the way around the island.
Yeah, well, they said all we got to do is swim part of the way.
Yeah. That's easy. That's easy enough.
Yeah. So
It's a little cliffy over on the other side.
Yeah,
we
that's what they
understand
said.
it's a little
Yeah.
cliffy. Up there was a little gnarly. That over there it's cliffy, right?
Yeah, over there it's vertical into the water.
I'm the senior guy. I'm Dan. I'm from Snohomish, Washington. I've been on the island probably longer than any of you. 3 hours in my life.
Awesome. Cool. I think you just
Are you guys going to walk a certain direction today?
We're going to walk this way, but pretty slowly.
We'll probably just keep going. But I want to listen to everyone else. Though.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually left by car.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I know the canoe.
Yeah, Pete's headed down the beach. He's a high school classmate of ours.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cool.
Meet up with him.
Well, with the tide this low, if you guys want to walk that part up there, because it's a bluff, you know.
Yeah,
And
Pete just came around Clark's Point, so we're like.
there's more bluff that way. Just saying. I'm not bluffing. Sorry.
I'm with Masters in Social Science, but we're through the NW Straits Foundation, which is a nonprofit that's based out of Bellingham.
I know I like
Yeah, you want a cart?
Oh, all good. I
Hey, I'm a coastal geologist and we do most of the what strategies, things you would do on a low bank, no bank area versus high bank, which I think some people live over here, maybe up on the high bank. Anyone? No? On the other side, okay. Originally there were people signed up who lived up there, but there are, I think some of you guys live down on this low bank, no bank area, so just trying to think about different ways to mitigate flooding and erosion, and also thinking about sea level rise, and the kind of the latest projections, right? Okay, any questions before I kind of get started with some background and context? So while you guys are probably aware, Guemes Island is part of the San Juan complex, right? So we're the archipelago here that makes up about 400 different rocks and islands of the San Juans. We're not in San Juan County, but you can kind of group Guemes and Cypress into that group, right? And we're in a really important place because the Swinomish Channel connects Skagit Bay and it has juvenile salmon that come out of Skagit Bay, and one of the first places they stop is the shores of this island. So they kind of tuck in here, right? And then they start feeding on their way out to the ocean. So we have this map here, and I'll pass this around when we're done. But this was a study in the Salmon Islands, so close by, where they did beach seining twice a year for about 10 years, I believe. So I don't know if you guys know what beach seining is, but they go out with like big nets and they try to catch the juvenile salmon, and they can track where they came from. And so these arrows indicate where they found that the juvenile salmon were coming from. So we have a lot coming from Canada. So the bigger arrow means that they found more salmon coming from Canada, from the Lower Fraser. We have fish coming from the Nooksack, the Samish, and then from the Skagit and the Stillaguamish up that channel, the Swinomish Channel. And you can see one of the first places they're going to land is Guemes. So they kind of come in here, they tuck in here, they eat as much food as they can, right? And then they head out to open ocean, right? You can think like reversing these arrows as well. So when they're coming back to their natal streams, these arrows reverse and they come back into the San Juan to Guemes and then come back into the rivers, right?
How long do they live? A year?
Salmon? They definitely longer than a year. Well, it takes them probably, they're out in the ocean for about 5 years, I believe, and then they come back in, right? So yeah, they kind of duck in here on the way out, and then they come back. So the other thing that we have here is forage fish spawning. So there's these small fish called surf smelt sand lance. Have you guys heard of those? There's also the Pacific herring, and they come up and they spawn on the beaches here, and they are the food basically for salmon, as well as marine birds and mammals. So orcas eat them. So they're like the really important key food source for a lot of the different species. And so Guemes Island provides a lot of habitat for that. So they spawn in these nice sandy beaches here that you guys have on this west side of the island.
And what's the name of the fish?
There's surf smelt and sand lance. And then there is Pacific herring, and they spawn on the eelgrass blades offshore. And we'll go into that a little bit more about what habitat they need as we walk down the beach. But just wanted to kind of touch on, that's the kind of important things that the shoreline here provides, right? And so the other thing is the Coast Salish Sea, has used the waters around here for fishing, for shellfish, or cultural practices. And then today, as you guys are well aware, we have this rural community out here that has a deep love of nature and wants to be stewards, right? So we've heard a lot of people here. There's a big contingency of people like the Guemes Green Week, I think it was, when there was a lot of different talks and things going on. There's participants for that as well. And I want to say that, a lot of the shoreline here on the island is private, right? So about 90% of the shoreline in the San Juan Islands are private property, and that provides a lot of opportunities, basically, for these private property owners to be stewards of the shoreline. So very, very important for you guys, because we can't just do it with the public beaches that we have, right? Okay, any questions about that? And I'll pass this around if you guys want to take a look at this at all. Let's see.
I have a question.
I
missed part of it. Did you say that the arrow and the size of the arrow, this is all to key or to scale to kind of represent the ratio of where most of the fish are coming from?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes. So the bigger the arrow, the more fish are coming out of that. So you can see the most come from Canada, and then probably the second most is from the Skagit River and the Stillaguamish River.
I don't see any from the lower sound.
The lower sound, I think, is there. Yeah, there's
a small arrow there.
There is no arrow from down there, so this is kind of indicating that if they found any, it was very, very few coming from the lower sound.
Really?
Yeah. They're mostly coming from different areas here.
Is that because the lower sound is more populated?
Yeah, I mean, the Duwamish is it's pretty far. I mean, there's definitely, you know, fish coming there, but they might not come up into this area as much, and they might go straight out to the, you know, Strait of Juan de Fuca, and they might be feeding on islands, you know, lower in the south, right? Okay, a couple more things before we move on. So I want to just go over kind of the general geology of the area. So the oldest rocks on the island are, of course, the bedrock, which makes up the Guemes Mountain and, you know, Cypress Mountain, or Cypress Island and mountain that we're looking at here. We're not really going to talk about the bedrock geology because, one, it's very complex, lots of faults and folds, but also because in the context of when we're thinking about engineering and problems on the shoreline, if you have a house that's on bedrock, I'm like, you're great, you're good, you're golden, right? So we're not really that worried about that. And so we won't really go into that. The next thing is most of the island is shaped by all the glaciers that pass through this area. So I have a map of just the geology of the area here. And pretty much all the colors are all different glacial units, except for this bedrock over here in brown. So there's a lot of different glaciations that have happened in this area, and we'll talk about the different layering as we walk down the beach here. But basically what we're trying to think about is that depending on the material strength of the deposit, that's going to affect slope stability, it's going to affect drainage, and how you kind of interact with the shoreline, right? Okay, cool. So then we'll finish here with coastal processes. So we have several different coastal processes that are occurring on the island. They're the water levels that we have, so the tides, they're the waves, there's the erosion, and then there's sediment transport. So we have the waves that you guys know as the tides, right? So those are the predictable things. That also includes king tides, even though we see those as kind of extreme water levels, they are predictable. We know they're going to happen 4 to 6 times every winter. Then on top of the water levels, we're going to have these low pressure systems, so weather systems that come in, right? So we'll have a high pressure system happening, pushes down the water. The low pressure system is kind of sucking up the water on the shore. And actually in this area, we can get about 2 feet of storm surge, what we call storm surge, from a low pressure system. So that adds a lot of water level. And then finally we have waves. So we have the waves here are wind waves. We don't get any ocean swell here. We're too protected, we're too far away basically. And we have these what we call fetch limited waves. So fetch is the overwater distance at which wind travels across water. So the fetch from here to Cyprus, let's estimate it's about a mile. So if wind was coming from the west, the fetch would be about a mile. That's about the distance that the waves can generate, which really limits the size of the waves, right? On the north side of the island, there's actually a much longer fetch. So when we have those northerly storms in the wintertime, that Fraser outflow, which you guys are probably familiar when it gets really cold, we'll get some bigger waves, right? Have you guys seen bigger waves on the north side of the island? Yes, I can see
video of them.
Yeah, head shaking. Yeah, so you get those bigger waves on the north side of the island because it's not as sheltered, basically. And that feeds into kind of the amount of erosion that we're getting on our shoreline. As far as relatively, we're getting a lot less erosion on our shorelines than in, let's say, Southern California, in Maine, and the East Coast. You know, we're getting around a couple inches of erosion per year. And that's like sort of an annualized rate, right? So that's like a change event will happen, you'll get a slide, and then nothing will happen for maybe a few years if you're on a bank, let's say. And then all that sediment comes on the beach, and then we get this net shore drift. So we call net shore drift is how the sediment is moving across the beach. So here, the sediment doesn't just fall off the bluff and stay there. It moves based on the winds and the waves. So on this beach, let's see, there's a few different directions that the sediment moves depending on the time of year, the seasonality, but there's one direction that it mostly occurs, and that's the net shore drift. Can anyone see any indications of which direction they think the sand is moving on this beach? Okay, why do you think that?
I don't know, most of the wind comes, and the wave action comes from the southwest.
Right. So
See the sand along.
right, exactly. So we're stopped here, and I see this outfall over here, and you can see that the sand is built up on the south side of the outfall, right? And it's lower on the north side. So it's a pretty obvious indication that sand is moving to the north, right? So that was great. Yeah, logs can do the same thing when they're across the beach. You can see that. So I want to keep an eye kind of on that. There is a couple coming around this corner. The directions can sometimes shift, so you might not always see it on the south side. Backshore beach area. So the backshore is an area that water doesn't typically get to except for on high tides and during storms, right? So that backshore usually has lots of logs, and it might have a backshore berm naturally, right? So what happens is that the waves come in during a more extreme event. It's able to push sand and gravel up, but it loses its energy and can't pull that sand and gravel back down. So it continually pushes sand up, building up a backshore berm, right? A natural way to be resilient on the coast here and kind of moving the shoreline inland. And then again, yeah, I can't bring that material back down. That slight gain in elevation allows more vegetation to grow. So we'll get dune grass and beach pea. Do you have a question?
Well, I didn't mean, I was just making note.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
But when you
But
look,
I did, but relative, I didn't want to interrupt you, but would you say is the back shore measured to the ordinary high water mark? Is that typically upshore of that mark?
Right, so it's usually the backshore is above like mean high water. So that's kind of above like the top third of water levels normally. That's where mean high water happens. And so the backshore, we transition from the backshore to just the beach face, the active beach face around the mean high water mark. So that's kind of, in here somewhere. We can see the tides come, all the way up to here. There was actually a pretty high tide the last couple days. And so we get high tides in here. I'd say all of this kind of is backshore area, especially where the logs have been built up and pushed up, right? And so in this sort of transition between the backshore and the active beach face is where the forage fish usually spawn. So very high up on the beach. They like to spawn, they're opportunistic spawners. They come in here and at the very high tide, they lay their eggs, typically on sands and gravels. They need that sandy material to do that. And what's really important for the forage fish is to have some sort of shading too, because the eggs will dry out in the sun and die, basically. So when you're able to have dune grass, which there's a little bit kind of poking around, we'll point it out, if you're able to have some trees, some bushes that provides that little bit of shade, those forage fish can actually hatch a lot easier. And so, when someone comes to a property and clears all the trees and all the bushes and everything, that's really hurting, the forage fish from being able to actually spawn and survive, right? Then we move on sort of to the active beach face here. So this is where tides are coming in every day and moving sediment around. Hello. Hi. Hey, we're just doing a beach walk. I know you are. Yeah. Okay. Able to move sediment around. This changes probably a lot throughout the seasons. It'll be sandy, it'll be gravelly, right? And so we'll even get some of these little mini storm berms where there's a high tide that kind of pushes up material. And so this is a very active zone. Today it's good, we're at this very low tide here. We can start to see the beginning of a low tide terrace, is what we call it in Puget Sound. This is with relatively mostly sand. There's some not as much in this stretch of beach in particular, but there are usually some boulders in the low tide terrace. Have you guys seen that in other places? Right. And so those boulders, we sometimes call them glacial erratics because they were brought here by glaciers. The winds and the waves are not really able to move rocks that big. So in some places like on West Whidbey Island, there's huge boulders, 500 feet offshore. And what happened with those is that actually the bank was all the way out there at some point. They eroded out of the bank, kind of dropped down, and they are left there. So you can actually calculate some sort of erosion rates, very, very long term, very, very rough, by just looking at how far out those boulders are in the low tide terrace. Yeah, does that make sense? And then when we're thinking about the beach and the profile here, we're on this low-lying area, and how the humans use beaches that are no bank, low bank. So you can see, right out to the beach, which is great. But a lot of people put shore armor on beaches like this. So this is very ubiquitous in the 1970s. A lot of people did it. They didn't know why. Landscaping to just harbor shore. Their neighbor might be doing it, so they wanted to do it. In the 1970s, there wasn't, in the 80s, there wasn't really any rules around it. And now it's not, unless you get a permit, and you have to do a lot of studies to lead up to it.
But it doesn't affect the places that are already armed.
Yeah, so if there's any existing armor, legacy armor, you don't have to take it out. It's the new stuff, right? And unfortunately, we've learned over the past 2 decades that this armor is very bad for the ecological, for the environment. The place that it's most effective, for flooding and erosion is usually right where the forest fish want to spawn, right where all the action is happening. And it really changes, how the beach works and the rest of the beach. So if you look kind of down this beach right here, we have this area is basically armored, right? And we have all these drift logs, the vegetation, we have a mix of sediments, and then you look in front of that wall down there, and what do you see?
Sand.
Not much, right? There's not much drift log accumulation, there's not much vegetation, so there's not much habitat. It's basically being buried by the wall, and then there's just a lawn or something behind it, which is not really helping the ecosystem and the environment here. Any other questions about that? Comments?
I see a lot of lassoing of driftwood.
Yes.
In other words, the tide will bring it up maybe to here, and they'll run a cable or a chain or a rope around it and keep it from going any further out, and then wait for the tide to come move it a little further in, and they crank up the ropes or the chains or whatever. Eventually they end up kind of binding it up, sort of making a pseudo wall out of driftwood.
Right.
Is that?
So yeah, there's a lot of people who do a lot of different things, and there's a bunch of different types of shore armor, what we call on this, so bulkheads and logs being tied together. I think there are situations where that can be effective in some ways for erosion and flooding. The problem with that is when they're not done correctly, they can they can become a really big hazard. Basically, in high water they float around, but they're all tied together. They can be starting to bash your shoreline, acting as a battering ram, not being able to really float away. And on a bank or something like that, they can actually, if the waves are strong enough and they're connected to the bank, then they can just rip out the entire bank. So you're it's a dangerous situation by tying your logs, especially on a bank, to the beach, right, and to each other. So you're kind of posing a hazard. I totally understand why people are doing it, right? You want to keep the drift logs that you have and build up this backshore berm area for protection, but there's kind of trade-offs, especially the way you do it. Right, so yeah, so I'll go through kind of just the coastal landforms that we have here now that we're just here. We're standing over here in this yellow, and what we call this is an accretion shore form, which basically means that this area has been a depositional environment historically. Doesn't necessarily mean it is right this second, but the natural bank is way back there, right, and all of this material has been deposited since then, in more recent times, geologically speaking. We're going to move over north and see some of this transport zone is what we call it, which is a medium bank area where the bank has a little bit more vegetation, and then we move into feeder bluffs, and then feeder bluff exceptional. So you guys have an exceptional feeder bluff is what we call it down here. This is an accretion shore form, which is a depositional environment, right? So we have bluffs that are eroding on either side. A lot of sediment is coming to this area and built this wider beach up, this low-lying area, right?
Oh yeah, the road used to be this side.
Right.
Even the road has been moved because of the shoreline change.
Yeah. And so was the road moved back or forward? Where was it?
Here, this side.
Yeah.
The road was right here.
Road is right
So
here.
it's now, I don't know, 50 or an average of 50 feet further east.
So if you had property,
I don't know.
no, the road went right through the houses so that it was, yeah.
So you lost land basically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I think. I
From
mean,
the title action you lost. I mean, this, we have aerial photographs. We used to have 20 more feet of green
Right.
this way in 1990.
okay, yeah. No, that's definitely a trend that we're seeing all over the Sound. You know, we're losing lots of land. So when I say accretion short form, it's more that in geologic times, this has accreted north, you know, more waterward of the bank, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's depositional right now. So as you move towards these banks over here, we call those. Have you guys heard of the term feeder bluff or feeder bluff exceptional? So you've heard of feeder bluffs. Basically, they feed the beach, right? So we estimate that about 90% of the sediment from the beaches here come from those feeder bluffs, right? We don't have a big sediment source, let's say like the Columbia River, where that pumps out a ton of sediment, forming like Morgan Dunes or something like that. We just don't have that sediment source here. So we're really relying on these local bluffs to provide the sediment to maintain the beach, to keep those habitats going. Yeah?
They're giving.
Yeah, and they're giving, right?
You go to 1990 to now is what? How many years is that? 40 years or something?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they every year they give some of that cedar back.
Right. Yep, and that kind of, you know, it changes the way that people, you know, the land use of it as well. So people, you know, on the medium bank, they can maybe walk down with some stairs and have a little bit of, you know, a rockery around the stairs. But when you're on that high bank, there's no real way to get down to the beach. You have a great view, but some people build crazy things like trams and, you know, staircases. They don't really work very well, but yeah, so it's sort of a different environment up there on that side. So this is just sort of looking at the whole map of Guemes Island. So you can see there is four different places where there's feeder bluff exceptional, meaning that they're producing a ton of sediment. So that's actually really great for Guemes' habitat. The one thing that's sort of a detriment, and I'll turn this around, is that shore armor that I'm talking about, because that really traps sand behind, you know, to not allow that sediment to erode off the banks. And so everywhere that's red has been mapped as armor, is what we call it. And so there are some of the shoreline here, you know, that's in red, that's armor, and then to north of us, and then out to Indian Village, there's some more armor.
This is armor right here.
There's a little bit of armor here. You know, this isn't something that I would say is like engineered in here. This little structure, you know.
That was left by the county.
Right. Yeah, and then this, we wouldn't necessarily call this armor, right? I know there's human rocks, but this is a little bit softer, right? We're not going to wall. And then the armor down there is that and the wood. And so we don't really see that as much on feeder bluffs, basically because it's not very effective. Like, it's a very big slope, and putting a little bit of rock at the bottom,
You need a lot of armor.
you need a lot of armor. And there, you know, it's not just about, you know, wave erosion that's causing slope stability issues, right? You're having slope stability issues from the top. You're having surface water problems. You're having groundwater seepage, just the material properties of the units. So just stopping the one problem at the beach really isn't stopping the whole problem, right? Okay. I think, well, we can, yeah.
So is it fair to say, you know, not of your picture, but
Yeah.
the best stuff is coming from the mid bank or the high bank for the fish and all that. The best feed.
Right.
And yet, if you were to superimpose that picture, you know, one side to the other, from the back side to the front side, the areas that are armored are kind of in those depositories like this, not this, but like this, where they're low bank and so your people have armored up for whatever reason, county or people, in areas that they're kind of saving or trying to save, so we don't have to move the road again. But those really aren't the greatest areas for feeding of fish.
Right.
The areas that you can't even armor unless you bring the wall from the southwest up here. That's just a natural process that's going to happen. People are going to have trouble with their homes and property, of course. But is that kind of, not to make it simplistic, but...
No, it's great to simplify things. I mean, yeah,
I just wanted to clarify for me.
Armoring on a low bank, no bank area isn't detrimental to beach feeding, but it's...
A bit, though.
It can be, like the low bank could be eroding, right? But it's more detrimental because it's directly burying habitat, and it's also can be causing increased erosion, actually, because a lot of times when you have a hard structure, the waves will hit it and then actually project that kind of energy around the sides. And we call that end erosion, end effects. And then that creates like the next, property owner to want armor too, because they're getting increased erosion because of that. And then the other thing is that it kind of separates the upland habitats from the marine habitats. It puts this basically line in the sand that says, we're separating these. We can't have any habitat migration. It's harder for the trees to provide detritus to the beach and for the fish. So there's a lot of other ecological effects, but it's less about the sediment input. In some cases, though, depending on how far out the bulkhead is or the armoring is, it can trap sediment from moving. So if your bulkhead is way out on the beach, your next neighbor might not get as much sand, depending on which direction the sand is moving, right? So,
Oh yeah, I've seen the way, north wind, west wind, whatever, follow the walls and the action will pick up the velocity and the power.
Yeah, and I think there are some examples a little bit further down. A lot of times you get a bulkhead and it'll be a lot coarser in front of it because it scours, basically the waves hit it and kind of scour out in front of it, and then their neighbor that doesn't have bulkhead will have a nice big sandy beach, and you're kind of like, which would you rather have, right? A lowering beach that's coarse or a nice sandy wide beach?
The directly correlated answer is how close your house is to
right, or how low your house is too, right? Let's keep walking. That sounds good. Especially in the sun, slowly, and we have different carcinogenic, and it can kill foragers' eggs. So a lot of times when we're looking at bulkheads, especially if they're creosote treated, we would like to get those off of the beach and out of the marine environment, right?
Is it illegal to put them on your own property?
You cannot build a new structure made out of creosote anymore with a permit, right? Yeah, so yes, it is illegal.
Those creosote ones have been here at least 40 years.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the reason, they've been around for so long is because that creosote is really, it is, treating that wood. You can see a lot of times you can't really tell when it's creosote or not until you really take a look, and then you see how it's just around the edges is still there, and then the center is all gone, right? So it's just that creosote.
The creosote's doing its job.
It's doing its job, right? And it'll leach out for hundreds of years if you'll let it, right? So always looking for opportunities to work with creosote. One of the things that we do is we have this My Coast app where you can report creosote logs that wash up on the beach, and the Samish Indian Nation will come out and grab creosote. So if you say, I found this creosote log, you go onto the website, you say this is where it is, here's a picture, and then every year they'll come around and try to grab as many as they can. So that's a good resource, and I believe Ellen Wish and something maybe have it out there.
And what was the name of it?
It's called My Coast.
My Coast.
My Coast. But if you look up anything like creosote log removal in Puget Sound, it should come up with the Samish Nation.
But that's only if you have a log lying there, not like this.
Not like that. No, I'm just saying if like a telephone pole washes up.
Right, old telephone pole.
Old telephone pole washes up and it's on your beach, it would be good to report
Or
that.
a dock piling or something.
Yeah, dock piling, yeah. Any of those derelict kind of structures, we'd like to get those off the beach if possible, so you can report pretty much anything like that. If a vessel washes up, creosote logs wash up, old styrofoam that you can't get off the beach yourself, you can report that. Dune grass, you can see, I believe, so there's the native dune grass. It's kind of interesting that it's growing behind behind the armor here.
Just because water goes up and over.
Because water goes, yeah, because it's a very salt tolerant plant. But one very simple thing that low-lying shoreline homeowners can do is to try to plant this native dune grass.
They did plant this.
Right.
Did
Plant it on the beach here.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, no, I mean they planted it in there, but
Right.
I'm saying the water.
Water splashes over, right? And what this does, even without the wall, is it really holds the bank together. It has this rhizomal network of roots, and so it can just basically hold all that sand together. It also helps trap sand as it's moving along, and so it really builds up the beach. It traps sand and logs. So a very simple thing that shoreline homeowners can do is plant this
What's
little
the name of the plant?
dune grass.
American dune grass.
It's just American grass. There's European dune grass, which
Is
you
it
don't
by
want to plant.
seed or by starts? Or?
There's these little plugs that you buy. There's a place in Bellingham that sells them, and you just have these little plugs, and you just plug them right into the beach, into the sand. They want the sandy material at the very upper extent of your beach, and that's kind of the most simple thing that you can do as a shoreline homeowner to increase habitats and slow down erosion. So when we, if we do an individual site assessment for you, we probably recommend that, show you where to plant it, tell you where to get it, what time of year to plant it, and what kind of success rate you'll have with that.
Would you plant more of it on this side of it?
I'm not sure if it would work very well
This would all
on
wash
this side
away.
because the wall is here,
right?
and because the wall would be kind of scour it out. If this wall wasn't here, then you could have a nice big dune grass berm here, sandy berm with the sea rocket and other things mixed in to produce more natural protection.
It would have to be a lot farther in than this.
Yeah, I mean this.
Because you would have 10 feet of water there.
10 feet of water.
Without that bulkhead. Without
That grass
the
wouldn't be there.
No.
Well, maybe for a couple of weeks.
You would have to raise up, this is a little bit higher, like you'd have to have like a berm. You couldn't just plant it right in there.
A berm wouldn't work. You have to have at least 15 feet high.
15-foot high berm?
Wall, yeah, because the water's going to go up that high when it's coming in.
And the water will enter into that pathway, and then also.
But they
get
cover that
trapped
up. They
because
cover
it
that
can't
up.
come back out. So that's another issue to consider when you're dealing with armoring.
So, if they removed the wall and put logs, or allowed logs to come here, and then put the dune grass, you think that would it stay?
Right, so yeah, you're basically talking about, some sort of restoration project, remove the armor, and we build some sort of berm, right? The effectiveness of a berm really depends on how long of a stretch you're able to do. It's very difficult to do a project where you just do, let's say, one parcel. If you're able to do kind of a large stretch, all the way down there, you're able to set it back enough, able to put enough beach nourishing material, and you're able to plant it, then maybe there's some sort of success there. If you're very interested in just stopping flooding in particular, that wouldn't be totally effective for, let's say, like the properties on the end, because if the berm ends, then the water will just go right around it, right? So you have to have like a very big stretch of beach for a berm to be very effective at flood control. And you also have to look at the water levels and figure out how high that berm needs to be and how far you're planning with sea level as well, right? So let's say like the Birch Bay berm, have you guys heard about that project near where Birch Bay is, in northern Washington County? So they had terrible flooding in 2019, and then our company designed a berm, a mile-long berm, that imported a ton of cobbles and pebbles to provide flood protection for the entire city, and it's been working great. So they don't have a wall, they have a huge berm, and they've been good so far in the last couple of storm seasons.
So the berm includes not just gravel, but beach logs and grass and native plants.
Yes, so it's all the things to kind of hold it together, plus the logs. Yep. Yeah.
How much water does this get behind it?
Yeah, so that is a big problem with these walls, is that you have to think about drainage. So you'll have surface water here, you'll have groundwater, you'll have water coming in the sides potentially from your neighbors, and then it pools up back here. And if you don't have a extensive, probably very expensive drainage system to deal with that, then you're going to have some problems on the other side as well. So when you're building this wall like this, you really have to think about drainage and if it's really worth it, right? I don't know how much water. Have you guys seen water pooling behind this? I'm sure there has been.
The worst I've ever seen is when water was right above my knee.
Right.
Walking down West Shore Road.
Right. And so, I mean,
But
and this
that's only, I've only been here 47 years.
only.
So I'm saying that's the worst that I've seen.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so you have to kind of think, do you want to deal with, these walls have their benefits, to try to protect against erosion and some level of flooding. But once it gets high enough and you have rainwater, then you have a whole nother issue that you've created. You're trapping water, right?
But the water goes down usually within 24 hours. The main part that's going to be by the houses.
Yeah. And this house you can see is a little bit newer, it looks like, or at least redone recently.
Yeah.
They have built it up a bit. It's a good idea.
They were required to do it. They thought the water could go underneath.
Yeah, the water goes. So that's one of the mitigation strategies, especially for these low-lying areas, is, cutting to the chase, is elevating your property, elevating your home. It's really the only way to, stop the risk of flooding and damage to your property.
There were just two houses on the other side of where we entered the beach, just the other side. One of is Steve's, because he built new, and how far is yours?
4 feet up.
You're 4 feet
Yeah,
up?
I noticed your house is bigger than the shingled house, the wooden house.
Pardon me?
Is your house though a shingled house?
No, that's our neighbor.
Oh, okay.
It's a newer one just south.
Oh, okay. And you're built up.
Yeah, we're 4 feet up.
And then they lifted the one just north of the shingled one.
Right.
Literally jacked the whole house up.
Yeah. And they've been doing that a lot more in Puget Sound. There's a lot of, there's almost nothing else you can do. You can try to make the berm to kind of stop lower water levels and stop erosion. But really, if you're trying to think about eliminating damage to a house, you got to raise your house up. There's no sort of seawall. It would be so expensive to build a seawall. It has to be this giant thing. It has to have a ton of drainage. You probably wouldn't get it permitted. You're only pretty much going to get permitted to raise your house above berm on a situation like this.
Well, probably a lot of these people know this is a designated tsunami zone between the bluff down there and the bluff up here. So any new construction has to be up 4 feet, and if you're raising, it has to be up. Any permitting that requires expansion requires raising the level of the house.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's for new properties, and that's great. I'm glad that they're doing that. I think it's the existing properties that, they're having trouble now, and some people don't have the funds or don't have the means to do it, right? Or the house is so old that raising it doesn't make sense, so then it becomes a little bit more difficult. NW Straits Foundation can sort of help usher people through that process if they were interested in elevating their home or relocating it if they had a higher elevation area on their parcel. I don't think many of these do, but that is sort of an option to look at.
Yeah, as far as you can see, you got the road there.
Yeah.
And it's old, flat. This out back, 50 feet. Of course, then you have wetlands issues.
Right.
And so even if you didn't have wetlands issues, you're not changing much. Especially if you got rid of it.
Yeah, so yeah, these low-lying areas are really elevating and trying to do like some sort of berm, some sort of beach berm. It's kind of the bottom line here. Why don't we keep walking a little bit? Now sea level rise and what we've seen here in the past and what the future projections are. So in the last 100 years, what's been on record, Seattle's refuge has been going for about 100 years. We've seen 4 inches of sea level rise, right? But those projections of sea level rise are supposed to increase greatly, right? Based on ice melt and other processes, right? Global warming. So in 2018, the Washington Coastal Resiliency Project published localized projections of sea level rise for Puget Sound. Super localized. Like we even have our own projection just for the west side of Guemes Island, which is awesome, right? 177 different locations, and that's looking at a lot of different things, such as the vertical land movement and ice shelf instability. So I pulled those. I'll pass this around just for the west side of Guemes here. This is this chart. This has time on the bottom and sea level change on the y-axis here. I put two different projections of sea level rise. So we think of these as probabilistic projections. So there's a range, right? And it depends on your estimates, right? So we don't know exactly if it's going to be 2 feet by 2050. We say it's going to be 50% likely it's going to be this high, right? So this top one, this high one, is the 1% exceedance, which means there's a 1% chance the water levels will reach or exceed that value. So that's pretty low likelihood, right? So we're kind of thinking most conservative. We have that in the back of our head. It's like, that could happen, but it's probably not going to. And then this lower projection is the 50%. So that's a 50% chance that it'll reach that elevation or higher. So if we think about for 2050, that 50% chance for Guemes Island west side, about a half a foot. And this is a half a foot. That's to 2050.
50?
2050.
25 more years.
25 more years. And that's from 1990s water levels till then, right? So that's not from today. This is the baseline is 1990 for this study. About a half a foot is that 50% chance. So kind of thinking, and that's this, we'll get to that. And then by 2100, it's about 2 feet. Okay, so in 75 years, we'll get up to 2 feet based on these projections, right? So what does that mean?
2 feet added to the ordinary high water
Or added to the levels, right?
Whatever. Low, high,
Low, high, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't, when we're thinking like, oh, okay, that's only, 2 feet by 2100. But when you consider that 2 feet on top of a high tide, a king tide, with another 2 feet of storm surge, that can produce a lot of damage to this low-lying area, right?
But that's not even a storm. That at 2100, that 50% mark, that's just
on top normal 2 feet higher, right?
Sorry, is that from now?
From 1990. Yeah, and so what does that mean on our landscape? Like, when are we worried about, basically what's the elevation? So I pulled, we're looking at Guemes, we put 3 feet of sea level rise on top of mean high water, no storms, nothing else, and basically this entire low-lying area is flooding. So that's just 3 feet on top of what mean high water is like 8 feet here. So that's, about 11, 12 feet, and we're getting a lot of flooding in here. Were any of you guys here during the December 27, 2022 storm?
Yes.
Yes?
I was here, yeah.
Yeah, and what did you guys see widespread flooding?
Oh, right, that's what I was describing over there, is the salt water pond that was standing.
And so was there flooding kind of all the way back to the bank?
When you go down towards Maverick,
Yeah.
that was, so those are the north and south extreme where Phil was talking about it.
Well, as I mentioned, that water used to run through to the marsh back here. Well, it would seek the marsh and it would run right through. Well, now there's berms here that seal it off.
Seal it off, right.
To keep it from, and it would go through, and then low tide would basically not totally disappear, but go way down.
Right.
Now it stands.
And one property owner has actually blocked the exit down below.
Okay.
So where's that Star Eden's Road?
Yeah, that's where we started.
That's the corner where we started.
And then this whole low-lying area, if you have 3 feet to mean high water, it shows that it'll be flooding just based on the topography.
And it's a 50% chance that we'll be at 4 feet, 50 in 75 years, or 50 years?
2 feet. But you have to think, I mean, I put this 3 feet as this is when it's going to flood, but sea level rise aside, it's thinking about mean high water plus storm surge plus waves could still bring us up 3 feet, right? So in my analysis for when I was working on Coopville, that 2050 storm, which was probably, that 2022 storm was equivalent to what a normal regular storm would be in 2050, right? So you'd be experiencing something like that 2022 storm maybe 5 or 6 times a year in 2050. So that's what we're kind of looking at here.
You have, is superimposed on that blue area, do you have West Shore Road?
Well, this is kind of going over West Shore Road. And
know if you've gone online and looked at this, is it delineated?
It's right here.
West Shore Road?
It's right
Yeah,
here.
West Shore Road is here. It's just kind of,
Yeah, it's all underwater.
see it.
It's all underwater.
Yeah, and you, yeah.
Good fishing.
That's the whole wetland. Yeah.
That, the whole
From your
wetland
window,
area,
like the
totally
Edgewater.
underwater.
That's Eden's there, right?
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
right here.
There's our house right on the edge of the water.
And this is online, this information?
This is online. This is just the Washington coastal. It's like the NOAA sea level rise inundation layers. They have a sea level rise viewer, and you can put up the sea level rise all the way from 0 feet to 10 feet to see what happens.
Oh, and you can play with that
And
online?
you can play with this online.
So it's also this shore right there.
Also the South Shore, this low-lying area.
Yeah, the green is, what is the green?
The green is just a very low-lying area that it's not necessarily hydrologically connected to the shore, so this is really flooding. It's connected at some point.
It's connected.
There's some sort of berm or road that isn't connected, but this is saying, this is
it's
pretty susceptible. It's
low-lying
very
behind
low,
the road,
but it's
yes.
behind the road.
Yeah.
To be busy all day long, God.
Isn't that sea view?
Well, it's right where Guemes Island Road reaches North Beach, the first little part of North Beach coming from the south.
Yeah, there's that big pond.
Yeah, it's
So
a,
how's
it's a
that
marsh.
accessible? On what?
This is on the NOAA sea level rise viewer.
NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer.
Yep.
Can I ask is anyone asking a question? So I'm going to interject. So when you say 1990,
Yeah.
and it's not just trending linearly. I mean, it's taking into consideration in 2000, 2010, the differences
Yes.
in temperature, the form of the Earth, and all
Yes.
these other things.
Yes.
So it is as accurate with today's data as the model is predicting.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we're taking into account what the 1990 water level was, and then projecting, all those different components of ice shelf
Not just
instability.
bringing
It's
it
not
forward.
linearly, because right now
Correct.
the rate is only about 2 to 3 millimeters a year currently for sea level rise in the region, but that rate is supposed to, definitely exponentially increase with all
they're
the
gonna.
things happening.
I think they're solving that.
Yeah, they're solving
Wasn't that in the great big bill? I think in the fine print it was to solve all problems.
Right.
It was small print.
Right.
Another interesting footnote is that same pattern of low-lying areas being inundated. If you go to the Washington State DNR tsunami hazard map,
Right.
almost identical footprint for inundation.
Yeah. Did you see that one that was circulated here on the tsunami storm?
Yep. Yep.
We'll all be at your house then.
Come on down, or
Yeah.
up, I guess I should say.
Well, that's why you've invited us all up there.
Yeah.
We've made note it's on record now.
It's a big tip jar out front, so no worries.
No, really. I mean, you've offered.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
will take you up.
The crawl space is quite comfortable. It's about 3 or 4 feet high. Easily get 25 people in there.
Great, yeah.
We wouldn't even know upstairs. You guys were all down there.
This our well would be underwater.
Just kidding.
Yeah. and so yeah, this is so basically what this is saying. At 3 feet on a normal high tide, this is what's inundated. That's not saying it's inundated all the time, right? You're not totally flooded all the time. It's just during a high tide, you'll be inundated once or twice a day.
Yeah.
So,
Only twice a day.
only once or twice a day, right? So back to what we were talking about. It's really thinking about this, especially this low-lying area. What is the future? What are you going to do? It's raising your house up. It's trying to build a berm. It's dealing with drainage, planting as much as you can, some water-tolerant plants. That's what we were talking about. But it's a really difficult problem to solve. And so I'm not. It's hard. You have this waterfront property, which is great. Love it, but there's definitely some challenges here.
So the bearer of this interesting news is what keeps the crowd down, so you don't have to.
Yes, right. Some people don't want to hear it. They're like,
Well, they're in the same.
It almost looks like the tsunami zone too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
identical.
sure it is.
It's the
Similar.
same. It's basically the same.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean this is the
The low-lying areas.
area. It makes sense that this would be the tsunami zone.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there probably is tsunami deposits back in the marsh. People, you can core down
yeah.
and find tsunami deposits. What it usually looks like is like a bunch of shells and things that are found deep in the core and in the mud back there. So I'm sure that there has been tsunamis in the, during the 1700 earthquake, potentially there was some tsunami deposits. They've seen that at Ship Harbor and Anacortes, so I'm guessing it's here too.
Oh yeah.
Okay, any other questions about sea level rise? Yes.
What about, we just had a tsunami warning?
Yeah.
What about that? What plans, I mean, it was negligible, but
Right, so I think here...
what was the real plan?
Well, here we're not worried as much about distant, distant earthquakes. It's more about the Cascadia megathrust earthquake is what we're worried about. So we have the fault off the coast of Washington, and let's say that whole thing ruptured all at once, worst case scenario, there would be a fairly large tsunami that would come into the Salish Sea. I would refer to the DNR, which has kind of the magnitudes of what that would look like and the timing. It wouldn't be like an earthquake happening, you have a tsunami at your door. It takes a few hours for it to come into the Strait of Fuca and come around to Guemes Island, right? So you'd have a little bit of working time. I think in Bellingham, where I live, it's about 2 hours, so less here. A little bit less here.
Going up the Cascades,
Huh? Yeah, everyone's got to go to
You're out.
Yeah.
We get these things on our phone, like a child's been abducted, Amber Alert. Are we going to get tsunami alerts on all phones in the region? Or,
They have them.
I think you need to sign up for those unless we got it. Or did you guys get it?
The earthquake? No, the earthquake. Yeah.
The Russia earthquake.
The Russia
that
earthquake, yeah.
happened
Well, we were, as it was in Russia.
you have to be here.
Well, I don't know, but I'm sure
Oh yeah. I'm not sure if that's an opt-in thing or not because we didn't get it. I didn't get it on my phone. You might have to opt in. Right. Did you guys get the tsunami warning on your phone? Just like an Amber Alert?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like a ferry alert.
Huh.
Alert.
Interesting. Yeah, especially.
Yeah, the recent
Yeah.
earthquake there, Alaska, I would still just, it'd be really the big earthquake happening off the coast, which you would feel the shaking, and you would know that there's potentially a tsunami coming, and then you're really well aware of what's going on here, and that's what you're worried about, like the big wave coming here. And then you definitely do want to see high ground. And high ground probably isn't even that high. Just get up on, some bank, at least 50 feet up or something like that.
So your well is one of those up on the end of that road?
Well, but it looks like, see, this is all wetland right here.
Yeah.
This is where the homes are. And that looks drier than this.
Right, so this is lower, so you can see there are little pockets of low areas in this topographic model. Again, this isn't obviously perfect.
There's already a pond here all the time.
Right, and so there's just at least some places, at least in this model of the Earth, where you're getting water that's coming in here, and it's basically a bathtub. This is just a bathtub model showing like, okay, if there's water coming in here, it's going to flood this whole low-lying area. But these, places that are not underwater, it's just showing the elevation is higher, slightly higher. But, I would take these, with all a grain of salt because modeling the Earth's surface is very difficult, and knowing the exact elevation of everything, plus or minus a few feet, which could really do the difference here. So something to take into consideration.
Discount everything.
Yeah, discount everything.
Now it's all secrets. We were
Done
so attentive.
really well by putting logs and the dune grass. He kept a couple of the short pines when he developed a lot. And how much flooding have you seen on your property?
On this part of the property, there was flooding on the boat ramp and then onto the road.
Okay, so what you've done is worked, and you don't need a seawall, at least yet.
Well, we don't get hit as hard as...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bay that's kind of forming here. We're right at the edge of this little agate cove or something they call it.
And you've built up your house a bit. Yeah. Well, that's cool. When did you build your house? was hoping maybe some of the landowners who live up there were going to be here today, but they're not. They have totally different issues, right, than we have down here. So I'll first kind of just talk about the geology. You've probably maybe seen this diagram before. This is from Kelly Point. That's just to the south of us, where there's a really nice exposure of glacial material of the bluff, similar to here. So you can imagine this is basically the same stratigraphy, the layers are the same as what we see down here. So if we take a look down at that exposed bank, you'll see the bottom of the bank is a nice gray material, right? That's the Whidbey Formation, and that was deposited during the last interglacial period. So interglacial means not deposited by glaciers. It was between when the glaciers were coming through that area. And it's mostly, if you've been down there, you can tell me otherwise, it's just sand pretty much exclusively. And you can imagine that was deposited in some sort of like riverine system. So like imagine the Skagit River pumping out a lot of sand, between glacial periods, right? So we have that unit on the bottom. Above that, we see typically a nice little gray layer. Have you guys seen that down at the bluff? That's a peat layer, right? And so it's deposited during when there was a bog or a marsh. That's a very organic, rich layer. But you can tell, I guess, what do you guys see on the bank, kind of between the gray and the black layer? How about the water? Do you guys see water flowing out of the bank? Right? Yeah, so you get seepage between those layers. And that's because, you're getting that groundwater that really wants to go, all water wants to go to the sound. You're getting water coming to the sound here, but it hits that peat layer, which is a very confining layer, not very porous, right? So it hits that layer and the water just shoots right out of the bank. We call it seepage line. And a lot of times that can promote instability and cause landslides from oversaturation of the bank on that line, right? So there's likely that peat layer in there. Above that, we have actual glacial deposits, the first of which is a glacial outwash, if we're moving up, which is an advanced outwash, meaning that it was deposited as the glaciers were moving from Canada down to Olympia. So during the last glacial maximum, about 15,000 years ago, we had the Puget Low, which extended from all the way to Canada to Olympia, and it was thousands of feet thick. And as it grew, it deposited all of this material that you see in that upper bank. And it's not like super consolidated layer, right? At the very, very, very top of it would be very difficult to see from here. If you check out Yellow Bluff or you get closer, the top layer is typically a glacial till. And what that is it was deposited underneath the glacier as it was there, right? So it's a very compressed layer. It's deposited underneath that glacier, hundreds of feet, thousands of feet thick, a glacier above it. You get this kind of hard cap on top of that. Any questions about that? So we have basically an interglacial period at the bottom where there was, a river system, then it kind of turned into like peat, a boggy system, kind of like that marsh back there behind all the houses, and then we have this glacial deposits of advancing and then actually being here, right? And so the important thing when you're one of these property homeowners, you're really thinking about drainage, right? And vegetation to try to help with erosion issues, right? Your house is close to the edge. You're worried about what am I doing with my surface water? I don't want to saturate this bank. I don't want to promote instability. And I also don't want to clear vegetation to contribute to that problem. So the conifers around here actually absorb sometimes up to hundreds of gallons of water every day. So those are very, very helpful in, promoting bank stability, lessening the amount of water on these type of banks. So when we clear the land above the bank here, or even, half a mile landward, we're actually just putting way more water into the ground, which is going to make these banks a lot more unstable. So I have some historic imagery that I will show you, I think. Yes.
If you walk along that bank, you see a lot of people that are about
drain lines?
Drain lines that are, dripping down the bank.
Right. So, what do you do with that water when you get to when you're a homeowner, right? You have you're collecting water on your roof, you're putting it in gutters. Sort of the best practices for when you're living on a bluff is to try to bring that water landward of your house, not towards the bluff, into a rain swale, into the road ditch if you can. That is not usually very easy to do. And so most people send out pipes over the beach down to the water. So that's what you'll see, because they don't know what else to do with the water. The easiest thing you can do is just get like a corrugated pipe, a cheap corrugated plastic pipe is what most people get. They send it down to the beach. But the problem with that is that it's not really, the material isn't meant for that purpose, and it can abrade really easily, gets rubbed on the bank itself, the UV rays, and it cracks, right? And then you have a crack on this pipe, on your bank face, and you're expelling water right onto the bank face. And then you're causing more of a problem than you had just by doing nothing, right? So the thing you want to do, if you're going to have to send the water over the bank, is try to get a hard plastic pipe. We call it an HDPE pipe, typically. Something more resistant that's made for this, it's heat welded, and send that water all the way down to the bank, to the bottom of the bank, to the beach, maybe 2 to 3 feet above so it doesn't get whacked by logs and waves, and then have an energy tea diffuser, you've probably seen these before, to diffuse the water out at the bottom. These can be quite expensive, so going in with like your neighbors if possible, people have done that in the past, and then there is some sort of cost share program if you were trying to look at drainage upgrades through the Northwest Straits Foundation. So that's the drainage, yeah, if you live up there. But when you're thinking about kind of just the natural conditions, so this is looking at that same bank in 1977. So you can see how forested.
Is there a reference point?
Yeah, let's try to think about that. So this point right here, where that house, where that point is here, that's that point. This is that high part of the bank that's exposed up here. That's that biggest point.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is like Salmon Run and Totem Trail?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, right. So you can see how forested, the bank is, the uplands are, and how much water and surface water that was helping not drive towards the bank, right? So we see this is a lot more denuded of vegetation, right? These current conditions than, it once was. And so now the property owners have a lot more, basically. I also did pull up the 1886 map of this area. This way north is up. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but this is the T-sheets that were done by the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Service. They went around the entire Puget Sound and mapped, and they did a phenomenal job. It's pretty crazy what they could do back in 1886. Very, very accurate, the topo lines to today's conditions. So we started out on Eden's Road, which apparently was there in 1886, right? And there was looks like some, still probably the wetland was here, but all of these dots are actually trees. So this was all forested. It looks like there was some sort of agricultural orchard here, grasslands, probably grazing.
What's the name of that? Is that Agate Cove?
That says Hannah Johnson. A lot of times they named little points where they would do these references from, so you'll see different spots based on...
Amos Johnson was a homesteader.
Oh, was a homesteader. Okay. Great. I'm glad you're here. You know that. So yeah. What did you say? Anus?
Amos, I think it's Amos.
Yeah. And then we can also see there's a road up here, old road coming in, but pretty much it was all forested, along this area. So all that development and deforestation has definitely contributed to more slope instability on that side. And I did also pull 2024 images, I think, although we can really just look at it and see the difference here.
So why would there be so much less vegetation on the actual slope now than there was then? I mean, nobody's been cutting trees on the slope, have they?
Right. So there's increased, basically, surface water running off because the trees on the uplands aren't absorbing it. Trees do a lot of things besides, holding together the bank, physically with their roots. They also they absorb the water, and then when it rains, they dissipate that energy, that water, so it's not just going right on the bank face. So we're contributing just more groundwater in the system reaching the bank. Yeah, good question there. So if, yeah.
Those fell down naturally from the road system. So property owners had construction review and cut it, and that made the property owners
high bank, the best thing to do is leave as many trees as you possibly can, plant as many trees as you can, and add as much native vegetation, especially at that bank crest. So when we go into these bluff property owners, we really suggest that they plant a bluff crest buffer, we call it. So that's planting native vegetation, so salal, ocean spray, Nootka rose, snowberry, a nice thick hedge right at that bank crest, along with some trees. And we're not talking about like a row of trees to block your view. You're kind of planting deliberately to kind of frame your views if possible. But then the next best thing is to then plant trees maybe 50 feet back. So when the bank starts, receding back towards your house, those trees mature and then provide you that second line of defense against erosion. So then once it reaches there, you have those mature trees to hold the upper bank together. All of it's to say is that's just the drainage and the vegetation management is just to slow things down and not exacerbate the problem. But really, we're not stopping erosion on these banks, right? And so the next best thing is to move your house back. So we talked about elevating here. Those houses will have to move their houses back if they get too close. When we're thinking about when to move your house back, right? We're really worried when the house is about 20 to 30 feet from the edge of the slope here in Puget Sound.
A lot of those are really close.
Some of those are very close.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the problem with, even though the erosion rate is fairly slow around here, when you're thinking about moving your house back, you have to bring a ton of heavy equipment in. And if you're too close to the bank, the contractors won't bring the heavy equipment to your house if it's 20 feet next to it. They're going to be too scared, basically, to do it. They don't want to slide off either. So you have to think a little bit more in advance before you want to actually relocate your house back. And hopefully you have room to do it, is the other thing. I don't know if anyone has heard of any houses moving back on Guemes. Have you guys? No? Just elevation? Well, some of those are kind of close.
South Shore, over on South Shore Road.
Yeah.
On the other side, yes.
Yeah. Oh, on South Shore Road, yeah.
Yeah, that's the road that itself is right on the bluff rim, and they've had to close the downslope
It's one lane now, right?
Well, in about 5 places.
And they're gonna move that road back. I mean, it's
No, they're not. The county's not going to pay for that.
no, but it's not off the table as quickly as you brought it. It's almost inevitable that something, and they've even done surveying even behind the homes now. It's not next week either.
Is there other access behind that they can use? All new lateral driveways coming in.
It's pretty ingenious what they did now. It's really a pretty great solution, kind of, to share the road. I mean, it's like New Zealand up there. I mean, you one-way road, wait, and then go. But
just buying you some time, I guess.
I think
We walked along that road quite a bit. At one point, most places where it's been made to one lane, the road is still flat. But there's one section that's about 30 feet that you can see probably that much difference in the height.
The road is cracked.
Right,
Then
yeah.
you can see the cracks and they're opening up. But that's only one place.
Yeah, I worked on Pen Cove Road in Pen Cove on Guemes Island, where they have a very similar road that was kind of caving in, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And then we told them, relocate it way back, send the road, behind the houses, all that stuff. What they ended up doing was just moving the house back, or sorry, not the house, the road as far back as they could within the right of way. So they rebuilt the road 10 feet back.
Well, that's
And
what they
just
did.
to buy time.
That's what they did in front of our house. They moved the road within the right of way.
Yeah.
I think there's still about 6 or 8 feet of right of way that's not, that's the ditch and then our fence. But yeah, they did move the road. out. But I think that's the only place along there that they did that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yeah, I think the counties are very reluctant to try to really close down roads. It's a lot of money, yeah, and a lot of time and resources. But eventually, those things will have to happen one way or another, right? Or eminent domain where they're buying, because a lot of those properties have really big lawns in front of their house, where maybe you could build the road even further back, right? But that's difficult. Out of the right of way, that's very difficult to get homeowners on board.
That's what happened here when the road was right here.
Yeah.
These property owners went back, they cut the road between and property in town.
Yeah.
Bisected the property,
So people own property land on each side.
When was that? This is a private beach that people shouldn't be walking on?
There are some strangers who move here.
Right, like no loitering, no hanging out for a long time, but just to walk the beach.
Right, nobody has a problem with that.
No one has a problem with that. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, we almost didn't do the beach walk here because somebody raised a flag and said, we don't want to do a beach walk here, it's going to bug the neighbors.
Just
It's
loitering, I
private
thought
beach.
this was education.
Yeah.
Can loitering be education? I guess. By definition.
Yeah. But we're glad we made it here.